right, our speaker, of course, she's a former public sector executive with over 20 years of leadership and has trained over 100,000 people. She went on a solo cruise. Hey, look, we got the cruise vibes right. For her 50th birthday, family of 4, party of 1. And she's the brand new author just about to be released of Cheers to Monday, the surprisingly simple method to lead and lead with less stress and more joy. Now available at Amazon. Everyone hit the chat. Let's welcome your speaker today, Amy Leneker. Good morning, Amy. How are you doing?
So good. And I just wanted to start by saying thank you to everyone for being here. There are so many ways you could be spending the next hour, and I'm thrilled that you're here. And John, thank you. I knew you would kick us off in the best way. So if anyone out there needs a virtual producer, look no further. John is as good as it gets. I'm now at the point I don't do events unless John is available. So if you are looking for someone, look no further. Yes, John is terrific. Thank you, Barbara. I agree. So here's what I've got for you today. We are going to do 4 things together. You are going to get some clarity about your values as we head into the new year. You may have done a values exercise before. Today, we're going to do one that's going to feel a little bit different. Secondly, we're going to talk about how can you use those values to make good decisions and to help you keep really good boundaries at work and frankly, outside of work too. The third thing is we're going to look at how can you stay aligned with your values when work gets stressful. It's easy to stay aligned with our values when everything's going great. When you're on top of the world, it's easy to live into our values. But when work is stressful, when times are challenging, it can get harder. And that's when it's most important to live into our values. And then the last thing, we're going to end on some brand new research that just came out about hope. And we're going to link that to your values. So how does that sound? So far, so good? Yes, I'm imagining all of your faces saying yes. Okay, so here's our schedule. If you are on the West Coast, these times are going to line up great. If you're not, you might have to do some calculations. I know we've got folks here from the East Coast and from Texas, and so I'm thrilled that you're here from all over. We are going to go until 9:40. And then at 9:40, we will take a stretch break or a dance break, as John likes to call them. And then if you want to come on back at 9:45, we'll do a Q&A and I'll do some live coaching. So if you just want the workshop part, you can leave at 9:40. If you want to stay for Q&A and coaching, I'd love to have you come back at 9:45 and we'll go until 10. Let's start how we always start. If you are a returning learner with me, you know we always start with a 2-word check-in. If this is your first time here, I'm so glad you're here. I hope it's the first of many times we get to learn together. So go ahead and type into chat, how are you today, in just 2 words. This is the 2-word check-in from Brene Brown. She starts every meeting this way. So let's see what your answers are. All right, hanging on. I'm tired and curious. I'm absolutely fabulous. Feeling good, focused and engaged. I'm calm but tired. I feel weary and hopeful. John, anything jumping out at you here?
Well, all I did in the preset, Joan wanted to ask, how do you say so positive, Amy? And of course, someone else asked, how did you write your bio? And I saw you chatted a reply to that.
Thank you. So we're going to talk about the positivity today, about how we need to avoid toxic positivity and how the Stockdale paradox is the key to optimism. So we're going to cover that in this section on hope. Thanks for teeing that up, John.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Stressed, anxious, heavy, but present. So why in the world do a 2-word check-in? Why do I do this every single time? Why does Brene Brown do this every single time? Well, there's 2 reasons. The first one is it gives you a moment to pause and say, how am I? How am I? We move so quickly from one thing to the next that we very rarely pause and say, well, how am I in this moment? The second thing is it gives us a really quick pulse check, exactly like Jennifer just said in the chat feature, so that we know where other people are coming from too. Some of you said that you are excited and hopeful. Others said you're feeling weary and stressed. So that quick pulse check of how are we? And imagine if we were an intact team and we did this in one of our staff meetings. Some of the things that I saw in chat, I would follow up with you after. That's the point of the 2-word check-in. I would follow up and say, hey, I saw on the 2-word check-in you typed in that you were feeling stressed and worried. How are you? Can I help? That's the point of the 2-word check-in. When I facilitate for teams now, if I forget, they'll remind me. They'll say, wait, aren't we going to do the 2-word check-in? Because it just becomes part of how we work. Let's get into our topic for the day, which is values. And we're going to look at values as a lens of what is most important to us. And the exercise that we're going to do comes from my new book, How Could It Not? So in Cheers to Monday, I looked at the research on values and the connection between our values and the stress and the joy that we experience at work, and the stress and the joy that we experience outside of work. And there is no question that they're connected. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to identify what your values are so that we can end up with less stress and more joy by aligning ourselves with those values each and every day. The thing about values is that it's not going to take all of your stress away. Wouldn't that be great if it did? If just living into your values meant that your annoying coworker was no longer annoying, or that your unmanageable workload was no longer unmanageable. That's not how values work. They don't remove stress, but they help you respond in a way that protects your joy. And those are two really different things. And that's where we're going to focus our energy today, is how can we use our values to reduce stress, knowing that we can't remove it, but creating more space for joy in our workplaces. So I'm curious, think about a moment when you felt joyful at work. And maybe it is your current job. Maybe it's a memory from a year ago or 10 years ago. I had a woman do this exercise once, and it was from 30 years ago that she thought of a joyful memory. So there's no timeline. There's no rule. Just think of a moment that you felt joyful at work. And type a few words into the chat feature, because I'd love to hear. What was this moment that brought you joy? All right, Rose went first, helping others. Thank you for that, Rose. Celebrating a project completion. When I first start a job, I can relate to that too, Kirsten. Working with people every day. When I'm employed, I supervise. Yes, when an employee that I supervise has a success. I love that. And I think that is spoken like a true leader, that sometimes the most joyful moments we feel as leaders are when we see other people succeed. I love that.
Amy, I have something that's curious. Jody chatted facilitating Hope Cafes. I wonder what a Hope Cafe is.
Oh, we need more, don't we?
Yeah, feel free to add a little more to that, Jody. Thank you.
Yes, because I want to go there, John. Let's go to the Hope Cafe together.
Have a latte? Have a Hope latte? Okay,
yes.
Good.
Let's see. Elizabeth says an impromptu chat. Whenever I help someone. Oh, Jay worked in a donut shop in high school. That's fantastic. Finishing a project that benefited others. Yes, and you can see the list is going on and on and on. Alice is talking about dad jokes, which are always a win for me too. The older I get, the funnier they get. So joyful memories. Remember what that was, because we're going to come back to it in just a few minutes. We're going to come back to that moment when you felt joy at work. Let's go a little in the other direction for just a moment, and let's talk about stress. Because stress and joy are not opposites. And I thought they were. When I began the research, I just assumed they were, because there aren't many feelings that feel more opposite to me than when I'm feeling stressed and when I'm feeling joyful. But I was completely wrong. The research shows they're not opposites at all, because stress is a reaction and joy is a feeling. So we can do both at the exact same time. So type into chat, on a scale of 0 to 10, how challenging has your stress been? No right answer, no wrong answer. Let's see. Gosh, John, you're quick at this. What are you seeing before
I see a lot of 8, 9, 10s here.
Yeah.
I think your average is easily a 7.64.
Yeah, I just saw a 10 plus too. And John and I do this workshop together a lot, and these numbers are higher than what we typically see.
Barrett is one of my fans too, with Spinal Tap. He says his stress goes to 11.
To 11, yeah. Yeah. So the reason why I asked you about how challenging your stress has been is because in all the interviews that I conducted, I did over 150 interviews with leaders and focus groups. The higher amounts of stress we feel, the more likely we are to get pulled out of our values. And that's really important for us to understand, that when you're feeling stressed, when you're feeling pulled thin, when you're feeling stretched at work, we're more likely to get pulled out of our values. And when we do, when we get pulled out of our values, everything starts to feel worse. We feel misaligned. We might start reacting instead of responding. Now we have to go back and clean things up because we said something that we didn't mean to say. So it's important to pay attention to our stress levels because it has a direct impact on how easy it is for us to live into our values. I'd like you to think about, you don't have to type this one into chat, especially if the person that causes you stress is here. I would never want you to put that into chat. But I'd like you to think for just a moment about a stressful conflict at work. Not an easy conflict, not one that just took a 1 minute conversation and you resolved it and moved forward. But think about a stressful conflict. Maybe it went on for a while, or maybe it was too hard to even engage, so you had to avoid it or you had to carry it without any resolution. Or maybe the emotions were just high. Maybe it was something that weighed on you. You found yourself thinking about it as you were driving home from work. You found yourself thinking about it first thing in the morning. That's a stressful conflict at work. So give us a thumbs up or any kind of emoji in the chat feature. Have you been able to think about a stressful moment? This is going to help us know if you are ready to move. Yes. Okay, great. I see some. Wonderful. All right. So you've got your joyful memory and you've got your stressful conflict. So tuck both of those away because we're going to bring them back in just one moment. What we're going to do now is John has a handout for us. He's going to drop it in the chat feature. Thank you in advance, John. And it's going to give you an opportunity to discover your top 3 values. There is no magic number around 3. If you do this exercise and you say, there's 2 that stand out, 2's the right number for me, or if 4 is the right number for you, there's no magic around number 3. I would just encourage you to not have too many. If you start getting beyond 3, at least in my leadership coaching experience, if you start to have more than 3, it's harder for people to remember those. It's harder for people to live into those. So I am going to pause. I'm going to be quiet for about 3 to 4 minutes to give you a chance to look at page 4 and identify which of those values jump out at you. Which ones feel most important to you? And if you feel like this isn't enough time, that's okay. This session is being recorded. So if you want to go back and take a half an hour, or maybe you even want to take a day to think about it, you can do that too. John, I heard from Tracy that she's unable to see the handout. I wonder why. The PDF that's in there?
I'll send her the link too.
Okay, because I'm able to open the PDF, but I'm not sure. No, Tracy says, I'm sure it's user error. I doubt that. If it's a user error, it's on my side, Tracy.
Here you go. Again, it's a file in the chat, or if you click this link, that might be a way to do it too.
Okay.
Jay says it opened for Jay. That's good.
I wonder, it might be a firewall. Sometimes it's tricky. It works on my side, but who knows? Tracy, thank you for letting us know. If the link doesn't work, let me know and we can find another way to get it to you too.
Yeah,
All right,
Amy, you can send it on Monday with the recording, but of course we want it now.
Yeah, for sure.
But it has the exercise in here. Your 3 top values. Oh, Amy, then while we have a minute, what are your 3 top values?
Thank you for asking. My top 3 are family, service, and kindness.
And mine was integrity, prosperity, and collaboration.
Ah, got it.
Oh, good. Ellen said it was also in the calendar invitation.
Yes.
And for those of you who don't get it, you can use a piece of paper and we will send you the PDF in the email after this program.
That's right. Thank you. So as you're thinking about your top values, and if you choose to do this with your team, and I hope that you do, your values are that compass that's going to help you make decisions. And values are what you want to align with when you're having conflict, when you're feeling stressed. I just did a workplace mediation yesterday. I'm a certified mediator. I specialize in workplace conflict. I mediate hundreds of hard conversations every year. And when I do a workplace conversation, a facilitation, I always start with values. I don't know how to navigate a hard conflict for you if I don't know what's most important to you. And so I always start by having the participant share what are their top values and then what those values mean to them. Because what you may find with some of your colleagues is that you may have a different value, but when you describe it, you're actually talking about the same thing. Or you might have chosen the same word, but when you describe it, you're talking about 2 very different things. So it's not enough to just say, oh, okay, I know that you value community. I have to go a step further and make sure I understand, what does community mean to you? There is research out of Harvard Law School. And I love this because I've known this anecdotally since I've started mediating workplace conflict, but it's so validating to have research from Harvard Law that now shows it, that the most difficult workplace conflicts to resolve are about values. We might think we're in conflict over a hiring decision or a implementation strategy, but if the conflict is taking a long time, if it's really emotional, if it's causing angst in the relationship, chances are it's about values. And the time to know what you value, the time to know what other people around you value, is long before you're in conflict. You want to be able to figure that out now. So that's my challenge to you. You're going to get this recording on Monday. You'll get the handout on Monday. Do this exercise with your team. Find out with each other, what is it that we value? A recent mediation that I did, it's not that recent, it's been a couple years now, but it's such a great example of how this works. So there was a manager and an employee who had been in conflict for over 6 months. And it was hard conflict to where people were having to choose. You could either be with the manager or you could be with the employee, but you couldn't be on both sides. And that's when the agency brought me in. And so I started with values like I always do. And look what happened. The manager's number 1 value was honesty. The team member's number 1 value was integrity. Different words, but when they described what those words meant to them, they were describing the exact same thing. So within just a few minutes of starting the conversation, they realized that, wow, this person that I have been in really tough conflict with for 6 months shares the exact same top core value as me. But look what happened when they shared their second value. The manager's number 2 value was collaboration. The employee's number 2 value was autonomy. There are fireworks going off in my brain because, of course, there's conflict. So we started talking about, well, how are you demonstrating your value of collaboration? And all the things the manager was trying to do to be collaborative were butting up against what the employee really wanted in autonomy. And all the ways that the employee had been trying to live into autonomy, they were trying to make their own decisions and not ask for help. Those were butting up against what the manager really wanted as a collaborative team. So knowing the values, it didn't erase 6 months of conflict. It took a while. It took several conversations. It took several months for them to rebuild the trust that they had lost during those 6 months. But what it did do is it finally helped them understand why. Why are we having this conflict that we're having? So there's your challenge. When you get this recording and the handout on Monday, take this to your team and see if you can have a really good values conversation. Troy asked if there's any tips on sorting your personal values from what you think versus what you should. Yeah, there's the work. Because what you value is really what's most important to you. So you've got to take the shoulds away. And research shows, Troy, that a lot of our research shows that sometimes we value things that we've inherited. We value messages that we've received directly or indirectly. So with a lot of leaders that I coach, there's this process of saying, is that your value? Or is that a value that you have just assumed was your value? So there's the real work. It's taking away what it should be, and it's saying, this is really what's important to me. The other thing that can help, Tori, is to give yourself the grace of saying, this season of my life. So these are the values in this season of my life, because your values might change. Your values might evolve. I work with leaders all of the time who have a significant life event and it changes their values. Either I've seen it when they've had a child, I've seen it when they've lost a parent, I've seen it when a colleague gets sick, that when we have a major life event, our values can shift. And even if our values stay the same, the way we define them might change. Through the pandemic, this was really common with a lot of leaders that I coached who had values like achievement, success. The way they defined those looked different during the pandemic than it did after. So all of that to say, Tori, to give yourself the time and the space to reflect on what it really is for you, not what it should be or what it might be. That's a great question. Oh, yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for asking it. When you think about what your top 3 values are, and many of you have those, I was so impressed how many of you were able to put those in chat already. Let's pause and let's see if there's a connection to joy and stress. And don't force the connection, but 99% of the time when I do this workshop, when you go back and look at that moment that brought you joy, chances are you were living into your values. And when you go back and look at the moment where you were feeling that high stress conflict, that really challenging conflict, chances are your values were also at play. That your values were either not being acknowledged or not being lived into, or maybe it even felt like they were being stepped on. When we start to use our values as a lens, of a map of having less stress and more joy, everything starts to shift. Jennifer, you were the first one. I love it. John, are we able to take people off mute? I never remember in a webinar.
We can if we ask them. Who would you like to talk with?
I'm curious. Jennifer Pickett, if you're willing, because you answered yes so quickly, I would love to know if you're willing to share. And Jennifer, you can certainly say no, thank you. I would love to know how your values connected back to joy and stress.
I see Jennifer unmuted. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Initially I said that I like to talk, you guys were talking about work, but I said what brings me joy is everybody asks like, how is your weekend? And it's usually because of my family. I've done something with them or not. It might be just a boring weekend, but it always brings me joy to talk about my family with my coworkers. And when they acknowledge, that my family is there, and that's my joy, and that's one of my top values. And then the stressful situation is when my boss, who should be somebody that is able to be candid with our boss, our big boss, and he can't. But yet that's actually what he was hired to do. So that brings me a lot of stress.
Yeah. Thank you. And I'm so willing that you were willing to go off mute. I know with the webinar, you normally don't think you're going to be talking, but I'm so grateful that you shared your voice with us and just allowed us to see how often that connects.
Thank
Christina,
you.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, John.
Oh, that was Jennifer saying thank you.
Oh, Jennifer. Yeah, thank you. Christina Smothers, if you're willing to go off mute, tell us what was so eye-opening for you. I'd love to hear your aha moment, Christina.
Here comes Christina.
Hi.
Good morning. I had a conflict with a coworker, and I would say it's a subtle conflict. There's something that grates on my nerves, and it just was completely eye-opening because I know exactly which value she rubs against.
Yep.
And I know how I can approach it now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so glad. And I don't know, Christina, if you know what their values are, but if you could do this as a team, there might be a real insight into, once they can understand your values and you can understand theirs, maybe you won't become best friends, but maybe you can have a working relationship without that added stress. That's the goal. So thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
There's no shortage of stress in the world. There is no shortage of it. So how can we create workplaces that aren't adding to that stress? And here's the thing about work stress. All of you know this already. You didn't need to come to this webinar to hear this, but how we're doing at work impacts how we're doing at home. And how we're doing at home impacts how we're doing at work. This old compartmentalized way of thinking is just not real. And if you look at the latest stats on stress, just a few months ago, the American Psychological Association released their latest stress report. They release it every year. They showed that we are now at the same stress levels as we were in the first few months of the pandemic. Isn't that startling? We are now feeling the same levels of stress that we felt in the first few months of the pandemic. And they also reported that over 50% of American workers say that their work stress is impacting their home life. That's a lot. So if you are part of that, you are not alone. If you're not part of that, then it's a big awareness to say, wow, this might be happening for half of my coworkers. Just one more scary stat from that report, because I share it with everyone I know. I literally shared it when I ordered a coffee yesterday. I always feel so sorry for the people who wait on me at Starbucks, because I always share random facts that they probably didn't want or need to know. But it showed that 70% of people who've experienced a divorce or a breakup with a significant other attribute it in part to work stress. 70%. And that number jumped to 79% for Gen X. So really big deal of how work stress is impacting our lives even outside of work. So if we can learn about our values and get curious about our values and find ways to improve our workday, then it actually starts to change our outside time as well. Let's see, Alyssa, it's always hard to tell, says, how do I change my perception and understanding with a direct talker when I am not? It causes me a great deal of stress. Yes, happens all the time. In almost all mediations I do, there is not an exact, they're not always the same in terms of directness versus indirectness. I think it comes down to agreements. I think it comes down to how are we going to communicate with each other? What's okay? What's not okay? It's okay to be direct. It's not okay to fill in the blank. So having those agreements can really help. Because if communication starts to break down, everything gets harder. Trust gets harder. Productivity gets harder. So it might take a little time to establish those agreements between the two of you, but I would argue that it's time well spent. And values might be a good place to start. If you can start next week, once you get this handout and the recording, start there and then have that go into a conversation around communication. Yeah, great question. I wish we could stay here all day, John, and just answer questions, but you probably have other places to go.
We'll try and get as many of them in the Q&A. So I'm holding on to all the questions you didn't get to.
Of course you are. You are a magician. Okay. One other thing I wanted to share with you about values, because it's not hyperbole to say it changed my life. I know that sounds so dramatic when someone says, oh, this changed my life. This literally changed my life. Many of you know my burnout story, that I burned out in a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad way. And I got really sick. My body shut down. It was awful. And as I was reflecting back on that experience, as I was writing the book, I was reflecting back on how I got there. How did it happen? What struck me is that when I was at the peak of my burnout, at the worst of the worst of the worst, I was living my values. How is that possible? I had always prided myself on, if I can just live into my values, if I know what's most important to me, if I'm just doing those things, everything's going to be okay. Only it wasn't. And here's why. At that time, my values didn't include me. John asked earlier what my top values were, and they're the same that they are right now, which is family, service, kindness. Those are my top three. And at the peak of my burnout, when everything fell apart, I was giving everything I had to my family. I was being of service in the public sector. I showed up every day and gave that job everything I had. I worked evenings, I worked weekends. Kindness, I was kind to the entire world around me. However, I wasn't included in those values. I wasn't thinking about, what does kindness look like to myself? I wasn't thinking about, what would it mean to be in service to myself? Once I had this realization and I started doing the interviews and I started doing the focus groups, I realized I am not unique. There's nothing unique about my experience at all. It happens all the time that we have values that are externally focused. We move through the world in a way of living into our values for the benefit of other people, versus it's also about us. We have got to be in our values. When John mentioned that I went on a solo cruise for my 50th birthday, that was me living into my values. And I had to think about it. So the old me, the burnout me who had to take 12 weeks off of work to recover, I would have seen that trip as a failure. I would have seen that as, I am not being here for my family. I'm celebrating my birthday alone. What kind of a wife, what kind of a mother, what kind of a friend does that make me? I would have not seen it as being of service. I would have not seen it as being kind. But now that I understand that I need to be a part of those values, I need to be at the center of those values, it was probably the most values-rich trip I've ever had, because I did live into my values of family. I lived into it because I was really honest with my family about why I was going and how excited I was, and they were excited for me. I share this with you because I don't know if this is resonating with you, but I have a feeling there are just over 200 of us here. I have a feeling that there is at least someone who's saying, yeah, me too. I've got these values. I'm not doing them for myself. I'm doing them for everyone else in the world, or I'm a leader. I'm doing this for everyone else in my team, but it doesn't include me. Judith, I just saw your chat that this can happen for you with service. It's so true. And it becomes almost this tipping point, Judith, where Service, what a great value. There are no good or bad values, but service, yeah, great. Be of service to other people. But there's a tipping point at which now you're actually not even in service of yourself. And Elizabeth says so wisely that if you have to take care of yourself, if you want to take care of anyone else. And I'll tell you, I work with leaders every single day who are taking care of their teams and they're not taking care of themselves. And it's harming the team, it's harming the organization, and it's harming the leaders too. So a moment to pause and say, are you in your values? And if not, then today's your day. If not, today is exactly the day where you say, I'm going to put myself in my values and I'm going to see what happens.
And Amy,
oh yeah, go ahead, John.
Elisa also added this too. She said, I'm lost in the value struggle and have been for a very, very long time. So how do you break out of that? I think this is a good time to maybe, if you have insights on how to break out of that.
Yeah, in terms of, John, was the question about breaking out of not knowing what your values are?
Lost in the value struggle.
Yes, absolutely. So a few things that can help. And these come directly from Brene Brown's research on Dare to Lead. I'm a Dare to Lead facilitator, and this question comes up in almost every Dare to Lead workshop I facilitate. So when you're thinking about your values, there's 3 guiding questions that can help you take this list of 100 down to a much smaller number. The first one, does it define you? Does that word define who you are at your very core? That's the first one. Second, does it help you make decisions? When you're at a crossroad, you can go one way or the other. Does that value help you make a decision? And then the third one, and I think this is the most important one because this is the one where I see the light bulbs go on during Dare to Lead workshops, is there a value that gives you the ability to do the other values? And that is a game-changing question. So you may have seen Brene shares her story that family is not one of her top 2 values. And she wrestled with that. Like, how is that possible? Of course, my family is important to me. But her values of courage and vulnerability, those are what allow her to show up with her family the way that she wants to. So it's not about having to choose everything. It's when I look at this list, are there some of these that allow me to do all of the other ones? And sometimes that starts to shine a little flashlight on the ones that are most important. Yeah, great question. John, thanks for calling that out.
You're welcome.
I appreciate you. Let's now move to the next part of our work on values, which is about connection. Values are a shortcut to connection. They can help you connect to yourself in the way that I just described about my burnout experience. They can help you connect to other people. They can help you connect to what's important to your team, what's important to your organization. And I wanted to share 4 things from research about connection. And this research comes from Gallup. So they have been doing this every year for, I think, 20 years, 18 or 20, a long time. They've been doing it a long time. And Gallup, when they ask this question, they ask it across 52 countries and territories. That's a lot because it represents 76% of the world's adult population. The question that they ask is about work. They ask a question about positive leadership experiences at work. And those are experiences where there's been connection, when there's a positive leadership experience. And what Gallup has found every year since they started is that the exact same 4 things show up. And I think this is fascinating because if you think about 76% of the world's population, there are a lot of differences in that group. Different geography, different industry, different occupation. And despite all of those differences, the same 4 things show up. And these are 4 things that are going to be your shortcut to your values. When you're living into your values, these 4 shortcuts of connection are going to be right alongside it. So let's look at the first one. The first one from their research is trust. Trust, it's the foundation of all relationships. And if you are in a work setting right now where trust has been damaged, or maybe trust has been destroyed altogether, values might be a way to build back. Just like the example I gave earlier, it's not going to erase all the conflict. It's not going to make everything fine in one day, but it can start to build a bridge from here's where we are and here's where we're trying to go. Values can start to build that bridge by building trust between you. The second one from Gallup is compassion. And compassion is that you care about me for me. You don't care about me just because I work here. You don't care about me just because I meet our performance metrics. You care about me as a human. And when you understand what someone values, you are understanding what's most important to them. When people share with you, here's what's most important to me, you cannot put a price tag on that data. You cannot put a price on what you're learning because you are learning the shortcut to compassion. The third one from Gallup is stability. And this one is so important right now because everything feels like it's changing. There is change upon change upon change. And stability is that even in the midst of all of that change, that we know what's true and constant. We know why we're here. We know what service we provide. Values provide that same kind of stability. Your values provide that stability to say, even regardless of what's happening around me at work, this is what's most important to me. This is who I am. This is how I want to show up at work every day. And then the fourth and final one is hope. And I love the definition of hope. They define it as things tomorrow are going to be better than they are today. That's the belief. And tomorrow might not literally be tomorrow. Tomorrow might be in a week or a month or a year. But the belief that things are going to be better. Our values are rooted in hope because our values are showing where we are, what's most important to us, and what is the life that we're wanting to live. I wanted to make sure and show this research to you because something really interesting happened last year. For the first time ever, the order of those four things changed. Up until last year, trust, compassion, stability, hope. That's how they showed up every year. But now, look what happened. Hope moved from being number 4 to being number 1. The number one thing that people say I need at work, the number one thing that people say is creating a positive experience, the number one thing that's driving connection is hope. Today, it's worth asking yourself, how are you bringing hope to the workplace? How are you demonstrating hope in what you say, in what you do, in the projects you're taking on? And John asked a question earlier from one of the participants about, well, how do you stay positive? How do you do that? And I believe the answer is the Stockdale paradox. The Stockdale paradox is named after Admiral Jim Stockdale, who was a prisoner of war. And he survived an unimaginable 7 years as a prisoner of war. And after that, he was interviewed by Jim Collins, who went on to write the book Good to Great. And Jim Collins said, how did you do it? How in the world did you survive when so many people around you, when so many people around you didn't? And here was his answer. Admiral Stockdale said that he never confused the faith that he would prevail in the end, which you can't, which you can't afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the brutal facts of the current reality. That's how he attributes his ability to survive. The ability to say, yes, things are really hard. Things are tough, they are brutal, and they're going to get better. That's the Stockdale paradox. And yeah, Amy's choked up. Thank you for that. That's the Stockdale paradox. And at work, And in life, we have to do the exact same thing. So I live in Washington State, and we're in a budget crisis. State agencies are on a hiring freeze. They're on a spending freeze. Things are tough. So to be able to say, yeah, things are hard, and at the same time holding the reality of, and we're going to come through it. And in the meantime, we're going to keep providing the service that we do to the people of our state because we do it better than anybody else. That's the paradox. And if you lean too far one way or the other, then trust in you is going to go down. If you're only talking about how hard things are, people are not able to follow that because they need hope. We just learned that. We learned that the number one need is hope. But if all you talk about is hope, if all you talk about is where we're going without confronting how hard it is, then trust in you goes down because people wonder, where are you? What are you not seeing? That's the paradox. That's the goal. To wrap up this part of our mini workshop, we have looked at what your top values are. We looked at how you can connect those to joy and connect those to stress. We've looked at the Stockdale paradox, how your values can help you stay in alignment when those two things are difficult, and about trust, compassion, stability, and hope.